You ever feel like nature's watching you? Not in some poetic way. I mean really watching you, the way a hunter studies its prey. I used to think that was just paranoia, but after what happened on my hike through the Appalachians back in 2010, I'm not so sure anymore. I'd been working at a bank for 8 years. Assistant manager, overworked, under-rested, the kind of person who checks emails in the middle of the night, just to look responsible. After a rough quarter and a breakup that knocked the wind out of me, I decided I needed a reset. No phones, no screens, no deadlines, just trees, wind, and quiet. I'd always wanted to hike part of the Appalachian Trail, so I booked a week off, packed my gear, and drove to North Carolina. 3 days in, 3 days out, alone. The first day was everything I hoped for. Fresh air, the sound of gravel under my boots. The kind of silence that doesn't exist anywhere else. I didn't see a single person, and after a few hours, that actually felt peaceful. That night, I set up camp near an old logging road. The temperature dropped fast once the sun went down. The woods turned pitch black, and the only thing I could hear was the wind pushing through the pines. But under that sound, I heard something else. Breathing, slow, steady, too close. I told myself it was just the wind, or maybe a deer. The forest makes strange sounds at night, especially when you're alone. Still, every time I turned off my flashlight, I thought I heard footsteps, soft at first, then stopping when I listened too hard. At one point, I called out, "Hello?" and instantly regretted it. The sound stopped completely. Nothing moved. I barely slept that night, and around midnight, I heard it again. A howl, far off but deep. Not a coyote, not a wolf. Longer, rougher, almost human. When morning came, the world felt normal again. Sunlight cutting through the trees, birds chirping like nothing happened. I laughed at myself, told myself it was all in my head. But then I started noticing things. Claw marks on trees. Deep ones, too wide to be a bear. A deer carcass by the trail, half eaten. But the bite marks, they didn't look right. Too far apart. Too deliberate. Still, I kept hiking. I wasn't about to turn around because of a few weird details. By the third night, I'd made it deeper into the woods than I planned. My GPS still said I was on the trail, but it didn't feel that way. The trees were tighter together, the air heavier. As evening fell, fog started rolling in, thick, white, swallowing everything in sight. I found a small clearing, set up my tent, and built a fire. Then I realized how quiet it was. No crickets, no birds, no wind, nothing. The fire crackled too softly, like even the air didn't want to make a sound. Then came that smell. Rust, wet fur, and something sweet underneath, like rotting fruit. That's when I heard the breathing again. Closer this time. Deep. Heavy. I whispered to myself, probably a bear. But it didn't feel like a bear. I picked up my flashlight and aimed it toward the trees. Nothing. Just fog and shadows. But I could feel it, watching me. Then something moved. A tall shape between the trees. Human-shaped, but not. The way it moved was wrong. Too smooth. Too deliberate. My pulse went crazy. I stepped back, Trying to keep my light steady, the shape shifted, circled me, slow. I grabbed my pack, stomped out the fire, and started walking, fast. For the first mile, I kept hearing it behind me. Every few steps, a branch snapping, leaves crunching. When I stopped, it stopped. I turned off my flashlight, hoping the dark would hide me. That's when I heard it breathe, right behind me. I ran. Branches whipped against my face. I didn't care. I could hear it chasing me, heavy footsteps pounding the ground. I don't know how long I ran. My lungs burned. My legs felt like lead. But finally, I stumbled into another clearing and collapsed. It was quiet again. I thought maybe I'd lost it. Maybe I'd imagined everything. Then I saw them. 2 red eyes floating in the dark. Too high off the ground to be an animal. Too still to be human. They didn't blink. They just swayed slightly, like it was tilting its head, studying me. My flashlight flickered. When it came back on, it was closer. It stepped forward. Its shape was man-like, but stretched. Limbs too long, too thin. Skin that looked like it didn't fit right. Fur matted with mud and something darker. Its face looked like a wolf, but wrong, twisted, too angular. And from its skull, 2 black horns curled outward. It didn't make a sound, just stared. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. Then it tilted its head again, like it was curious. That broke me. I turned and ran. I don't even remember how I found the trail, or how long I ran for. All I know is, I saw a faint light through the trees. A ranger station. I sprinted toward it like my life depended on it. The door was locked. I pounded on it until my hands bled, screaming for help. No one came. When I finally turned back toward the woods, it was standing there, right at the edge of the tree line, still, silent, watching me. Then it stepped backward and disappeared into the dark. I don't remember much after that. A trucker found me the next morning, walking barefoot along the road. I was rambling about a beast with horns. They said I was dehydrated, sleep-deprived, probably hallucinating. Maybe they're right. I went back to work a few months later. I don't hike anymore. I don't even like being near the woods. But sometimes, when the wind hits just right outside my apartment window, I hear it again. That slow, heavy breathing. And every now and then, I catch the smell. Rust and wet fur.
I'm a writer. Nothing big, just a few short stories that made it to small magazines and paid really well. But around late 2019, I hit a wall. My inspiration was gone, my deadlines were piling up, and everything I wrote felt hollow. That's when I thought about my grandparents' old cabin, tucked deep in the Appalachian Mountains, near a town so small it barely showed up on maps. I hadn't been there since I was a kid, not since Grandma died. It used to be a warm place, creaky floors, the smell of pine, and those old lace curtains that never quite closed right. Grandpa passed a few years after her, and the cabin just sat there, alone, swallowed by the forest. I figured maybe the isolation would help me write again. No internet, no phone signal, just the sound of wind through the trees, and maybe a few crickets. I left my apartment in Atlanta early that morning and drove up winding roads that got narrower the higher I went. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun was dipping behind the ridges, and a faint mist was starting to roll in. The place looked almost the same. Weathered wood, leaning slightly but still standing strong. The porch steps groaned under my weight, like the cabin recognized me. The first night was quiet. I mean, really quiet. No traffic, no hum of city life, just the sound of wind sliding through the pines and the occasional drip of rain off the eaves. I tried to settle in, made some tea, unpacked my laptop, lit the old kerosene lamp because the power wasn't working yet. The silence was thick, but not uncomfortable, at first. Then, just as I was about to crawl into bed, I heard something outside. A soft whistle. It was faint, like someone exhaling through their teeth. A simple two-note tune, high then low. I froze, listening. It came again, same pattern, somewhere from the tree line. I told myself it was the wind, or maybe a bird. There were night birds that whistled, right? I shut the window, turned up the old radio static for background noise, and eventually drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I found small prints outside the porch steps. Not boot prints, just the shape of bare feet, faint in the damp soil. I tried not to think about it. The cabin had always attracted hikers and curious kids. Maybe someone was exploring. But the thought lingered, because those prints led toward the cabin, not away. By the fourth night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The whistling had become routine, always starting around 2 a.m., always that same two-note pattern. I'd wake up to it right outside my window, close enough that I could tell it wasn't the wind. It was mimicking. Because one night, I realized the whistling didn't start until after I coughed. It repeated the rhythm of my cough, high, low, like it was answering me. I stopped sleeping altogether after that. I sat in bed, staring at the thin curtains, waiting for the sound. It always came. Sometimes it circled the cabin, slow and deliberate, like whoever, or whatever it was, wanted me to know they were walking. Leaves crunching, then silence, then a whistle. Then I grabbed my flashlight and finally decided to confront it. When the whistling started, I swung the beam toward the window and yanked the curtain aside. Nothing, just trees. But the light caught something. Movement. I guess just beyond the edge of the woods. A shape. Pale. Still. Watching. I tried to focus the beam, but the fog was too thick. By the time I blinked, it was gone. That night, I barricaded the door with the chair and left the light on until morning. The next day, I drove down to the little gas station in town, the only one for miles. The man behind the counter was in his 60s, thick accent, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. I told him someone might be messing around near the old cabin. He just stared at me for a long moment, then said, "You shouldn't be up there alone, miss. Not in those woods. They remember voices." I asked what he meant, but he just shook his head and muttered, "If you hear whistling, don't answer." That phrase stuck in my head all the way back up the mountain. Don't answer. That night, the whistling didn't wait until 2 a.m. It started earlier, around midnight, closer, louder. I turned off every light, heart pounding, and listened. The sound moved slowly from one side of the cabin to the other, circling. Then came something new, a voice, faint, like someone calling from a long way off.
Chelina.
That's my name. No one knew I was here, not even my editor. The voice was cracked and uneven, like an old record player warping the sound.
Lena, come out.
I held my breath. My pulse hammered in my ears. The voice came again, this time right under the window.
Lena.
I backed away, clutching the flashlight, but I didn't turn it on. I didn't dare move the curtains. Then, I heard the doorknob rattle. Slowly, gently, like someone testing if it was locked. When it didn't open, the knocking started. Soft at first, almost polite, then heavier. 3 knocks. Silence. Whistle. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My phone was useless. No signal. I stayed still for what felt like hours until, finally, everything went quiet again. No wind, no insects, just silence. When the sun finally came through the windows, I packed my bags. I didn't even look outside. But when I stepped onto the porch, I stopped cold. There were handprints, dozens of them, smeared across the glass windows and front door. Long fingers, thin palms, each one perfectly outlined in dew and ash. And in the dirt by the steps, someone had written one word, "Stay." I didn't stay. I drove until I saw highway lights again and didn't stop until I reached a hotel 2 towns over. When I finally got a signal, I called my editor to tell her I was fine, that I needed more time before sending any drafts. But before I hung up, she said something that made my blood run cold. "Funny," she said. "Someone called the office last night asking for you. Said her name was Lena, too. Said she'd see you soon." I didn't go back to the cabin after that. A few months later, when the pandemic hit, the property was listed as condemned after a wildfire tore through part of that ridge. They said nothing was left standing. But sometimes, when I'm writing late at night and the wind rattles the glass, I swear I hear it again. That same 2-note tune. High, low, and then, very softly,
Lena.
I don't answer. I don't even breathe. Because deep down, I know. Whatever was in those woods isn't gone. It's waiting,